£0. That is the actual market value of a beautiful historic cottage in these 12 UK towns. Not a leasehold trick, not a scam. Real, standing properties that you can legally claim right now. And you are not supposed to know about it. The government and local councils don't want you to know these places exist because the ground beneath them is quite literally cursed by history. While you are struggling to pay rent in London or Manchester, these postcard-perfect destinations are hiding top-secret biological warfare zones, unmapped nuclear radiation clouds, and ancient, unsolved mass disappearances that authorities spent centuries burying. One town features a local industry legacy so toxic it still deforms a wildlife. Another has an active underground government city built to abandon the surface population during an apocalypse. And the last one sits right next to a sunken World War II warship pack with 1,400 tons of high explosives that could detonate at any second. Most people will blindly book a weekend getaway here and drink the poisoned tap water, completely oblivious to the danger. Leaving this video right now means risking your money, your health, and your sanity on a lie. Subscribe right now because choosing wrong here could cost you everything. Let's break it down. Number 1. Imber, Wiltshire. It is the kind of town where the resident population is exactly 0, and the local council is literally the Ministry of Defence. Imber, Wiltshire. Deep in the desolate Salisbury Plain, it is practically neighbours with Stonehenge. On the surface, it looks like a charming medieval English village, until you notice the absolute, soul-crushing silence. It is historic, isolated, and wildly dystopian. Let's break it down. Median home price? £0. Average rent? Not applicable. Your dollar or pound does absolutely nothing here because civilians are legally banned from buying property. Crime rate? Officially 0, unless you count trespassing on a live military firing range. Here's the kicker. The unique stat is that the public can only visit about 50 days a year. Sound like a total ghost town dream, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The British government forcefully evicted every single resident in 1943, promising they could return after the war. They lied. Instead, they turned the village into a brutal urban warfare training ground, leaving the historic buildings as hollow bullet-riddled targets. As one Redditor put it, my ancestors left their plates on the table thinking they'd be back in a month. Walking through it now feels like trespassing on a massive historical betrayal. So, what's the actual price of admission? You get a fascinating piece of untouched history, sure, but you also get the creeping realization that your government can legally erase your entire hometown if they feel like it. Okay, can we talk about the roads for a sec? Navigating this place is an absolute nightmare. The potholes aren't from normal wear and tear. They are literal tank track indentations. If your GPS accidentally reroutes you out here on a closed day, you aren't just getting a traffic ticket. You are dodging actual explosive ordnance. Talk about a bad commute. Picture this. It is a foggy, freezing British morning. You look out over a crumbling stone church as a damp mist clings to the grass, smelling faintly of burnt gunpowder. The silence is deafening, punctuated only by the distant, echoing thud of artillery fire across the plains. It feels profoundly eerie. And if you think Imber's stolen ghost town vibes are wild, wait until we visit the town that traded its very soil to a toxic, chemical industrial empire. Number 2. Widnes, Cheshire. This is a kind of town where you can buy a house for dirt cheap, assuming you don't mind the actual dirt being a glowing cocktail of Victorian industrial waste. Widnes, Cheshire. Sitting right on the northern bank of the River Mersey, it is practically neighbours with Liverpool. On the surface, it looks like a standard, hard-working commuter town full of retail parks and modern housing estates. It feels deceptively normal, safe, and wildly ordinary. Let's break it down. Median home price sits around £145,000. That is less than a deposit on a broom closet in London. Rent hovers around £750 a month, meaning your wallet can finally breathe. Crime rate? Pretty average, nothing to write home about. But here's the kicker. This town was historically declared the dirtiest place on earth. Sounds like an absolute bargain, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The ground beneath the local parks and gardens is packed with millions of tons of galligu, a foul, toxic chemical byproduct left behind by the 19th century chemical boom. Digging a basic trench to plant some tomatoes can literally release historic sulfurous gas lines. As one local posted, "When we dug up our old lawn to put down a patio, the soil underneath turned a vibrant purple and smelled like a volcanic eruption. The council literally told us to just cover it back up quickly." So, what is the real trade-off? You save thousands on your mortgage, sure, but you might spend your evenings wondering if your garden vegetables are mutation-free. And don't even get me started on the weather here. When a damp, heavy fog rolls in off the mosey, it mixes with a lingering industrial vibe and leaves this eerie, chemically thick mist hanging over the streets. It clings to your jacket and makes the whole town look like a low-budget zombie movie set. Hey, at least in Widnes, you actually get a house with a roof on it, unlike the bullet-riddled ghost shells over in Imba. Hit subscribe right now so your next British weekend getaway doesn't accidentally end up in a classified chemical runoff zone. You're welcome. Number 3. Southport, Merseyside. They say if you walk too far out on the beach here, the coastline itself will swallow you whole, and the locals don't laugh when they say it. Southport, Merseyside. Perched right on the Irish seacoast, it is just an hour north of Liverpool. On the surface, it is a grand, elegant Victorian seaside resort lined with historic piers and manicured gardens. It feels nostalgic, peaceful, and wildly charming. Let's break it down. Median home price is £210,000, which is practically pennies compared to the South Coast. Average rent is £850 a month, meaning your bank account stays healthy. Crime rate? Just your typical coastal tourist pickpockets. But here's the kicker. The sea here retreats so far that it is literally invisible, leaving behind miles of treacherous quicksand. Sounds like a beautiful retirement dream, right? But here's what nobody tells you. Those endless, empty sands hide the skeletal remains of over 300 shipwrecks buried completely vertically under the mud. The shifting silt periodically uncovers ancient timber, Victorian artifacts, and human bones before dragging them back down. As one Redditor brutally put it, walking out on the Southport sand alone at twilight is the closest thing to walking on an alien planet that actively wants to drown you. So, what's the actual price of a sea view? You get affordable coastal living. Sure, but you also get a backyard that serves as a massive, fluid maritime graveyard. And let's talk about the parking situation for a sec. People love to park right on the beach, which is great until a flash tide comes ripping across the flats faster than you can run. Every year, oblivious tourists have to watch their cars turn into temporary submarines. Remember Widnes's toxic purple dirt? Southport said, "Hold my regional gin," and traded chemical soil for sand that eats automobiles. And if you thought a beach that swallows ships was unsettling, wait till you see the postcard-perfect town hiding a massive underground city built for a nuclear apocalypse. Number 4. Corsham, Wiltshire. You can live a perfectly normal life here, entirely oblivious to the fact that an entire secret city for the elite is sitting right beneath your kitchen floor. Corsham, Wiltshire. Tucked away in the historic southwest, it is practically neighbors with the city of Bath. On the surface, it is an affluent, postcard-perfect settlement full of golden stone cottages and peacocks wandering the streets. It feels peaceful, high-end, and wildly historic. Let's break it down. Median home price is £340,000, and average rent sits at £1,200 a month. Your dollar takes a bit of a hit here since cost of living is 12% above the national average. Crime rate? Ridiculously low. But here's the kicker. It sits directly on top of Burlington Bunker, a massive 60-mile subterranean nuclear city built to house 4,000 government officials while the surface population burned. Sound cozy, right? But here's what nobody tells you. While locals were paying taxes, the government secretly built underground railway stations, BBC studios, and elite bunkers right below them, even rerouting the water table to prioritize the politicians. As one Redditor put it, you'll be sitting in a quiet pub having a pint, and you can feel a deep, low-frequency hum vibrating through the floorboards from the classified tunnels below. So, what is the emotional cost? You get a gorgeous stone house, sure, but you also get the haunting reminder that if things go sideways, you are the shield, not the priority. And don't even get me started on the Wi-Fi here. The signal is absolutely abysmal because the heavy military subterranean presence and massive underground bedrock create constant interference fields. Good luck streaming anything. At least Southport Sand Graveyard stays outside. Corsham's secrets are literally breathing under your feet. And if you think a hidden underground city is peak existential dread, wait till you see the medieval port town of the ocean literally ate alive. Number 5. Dunwich, Suffolk. This is the kind of town where you can buy an exclusive coastal property, assuming you don't mind your property line moving 10 feet closer to the ocean every single winter. Dunwich, Suffolk. Perched on the bleak North Sea coast, it is roughly 2 hours away from Norwich. On the surface, it is a sleepy, romantic little village consisting of a single pub, a museum, and a handful of pristine cottages. It feels peaceful, forgotten, and wildly isolated. Let's break it down. Median home price is a steep £450,000, and average rent jumps to £1,500 a month. Cost of living is 20% above the national average, so your wallet is definitely taking a beating. Crime rate? Practically non-existent. But here's the kicker. This tiny hamlet used to be a massive medieval metropolis until a series of violent storms literally ate 12 churches, a monastery, and hundreds of homes alive. Sounds like a peaceful escape, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The erosion is still happening. Every time the cliffs crumble, ancient graveyards collapse into the sea, meaning local beachcombers routinely find human skeletal remains washing up on the shore. As one local posted, "I found what I thought was an old piece of smooth whitewood on the beach. Turned out to be a medieval femur from the lost parish of St. Peter." So, what is the trade-off? You get beautiful, dramatic ocean views. Sure, but you might spend your mornings wondering if your house is next on the Atlantic buffet menu. And let's talk about the stores for a sec. There are none. You have to drive 20 minutes through winding country lanes just to buy a basic loaf of bread because the original town center is currently sitting 50 feet underwater. Remember Corsham's hidden city beneath the date? Dunwich said, "Hold my ale," and an entire ruined civilization under the waves. And if you think a town being actively consumed by the sea is unsettling, wait until we visit the village that traded its coastal view for ancient, modern occult secrets hidden in the woods. Number 6. Burley, Hampshire. This is the kind of town where you can buy a beautiful forest cottage, assuming you don't mind sharing the woods with actual, practicing covens. Burley, Hampshire. Deep in the heart of the ancient New Forest, it is practically neighbors with Southampton. On the surface, it is a whimsical, postcard-perfect tourist village where wild ponies roam free and shops sell artisan fudge. It feels cozy, magical, and wildly eccentric. Let's break it down. Median home price is a massive £620,000, and rent averages £1,800 a month. Your dollar is completely vaporized here, with a cost of living sitting at 35% above the national average. Crime rate? Virtually non-existent. But here's the kicker. The town's entire identity is built on a famous 1950s which named Sybil Leek, who used to wander the streets with a pet crow. Sounds like a fun fairy tale, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The cute tourist shops are just a commercial cover. Real, secretive occult groups still hold midnight rituals deep in protected woodland spaces. As one Redditor put it, "Don't wander off the main walking trails after dark. The tourists leave at sunset, and the people who come out into the woods next are definitely not looking for ice cream." So, what's the actual price of a forest retreat? You get gorgeous scenery, sure, but you also get a neighborhood that gets very strange under a full moon. And can we talk about the bug for a sec? The clouds of midges and aggressive forest horseflies here are absolutely relentless. Try having a peaceful evening walk, and you will end up looking like a pin cushion. Dunwich had medieval bones on the beach, but Burley hides modern rituals in the trees. Be honest with me down in the comments. If you found out your town was built on an ancient, unmapped plague pit or a secret government tunnel, would you pack your bags and sell immediately, or would you grab a shovel and start digging? Let me know below. Drop a like on this video if it's giving you the creeps, and let's keep going. And if you think a village full of woodland occultists is bizarre, wait until we look at the ultra-wealthy playground for millionaires hiding a toxic history of public shaming. Number 7. Knutsford, Cheshire. It is the kind of town where you can rub shoulders with multimillionaire Premier League footballers, completely oblivious to the fact that you are walking over historical execution blocks and buried plague pits. Knutsford, Cheshire, located in the infamous Golden Triangle, It is practically neighbors with Manchester. On the surface, it is a hyper-wealthy, pristine playground lined with high-end boutiques, luxury sports cars, and historic Italianate architecture. It feels exclusive, flawless, and wildly upper-class. Let's break it down. Median home price sits at a staggering £520,000, and average rent cruises past £1,600 a month. Cost of living is 28% above a national average, so prepare to refinance your life just to buy groceries. Crime rate? Low, unless you are an expensive SUV targeted by professional car thieves. But here's the kicker. The town has a centuries-old tradition called sanding the streets, a beautiful ritual originally used to publicly call out secret local marital scandals. Sounds like a high society paradise, right? But here's what nobody tells you. Behind the flawless facades lies a brutal history of mass execution from the old county gaol, which historically dictated the layout of the luxury shopping district. As one local posted, the sheer amount of historical misery built into the foundations here is wild. They literally built a champagne bar over an old punishment block. So, what's the actual price of a luxury zip code? You get elite status. Sure, but you also get a town run by wealthy shadow committees that judge your tax bracket by the car you drive. And don't even get me started on the drivers. I swear, every supercar owner here treats the narrow, medieval cobblestone streets like their personal Formula One track. Good luck crossing the road without getting clipped by a Ferrari. Burley had witches in the woods, but Knutsford hides its demons behind designer sunglasses. And if you think old money social structures are intimidating, wait until we cross the border into a Welsh town that was completely drowned just to give an English city a glass of water. Number 8. Capelcellyn, Gwynedd. You can stand right on the edge of a stunning lake here, entirely oblivious to the fact that you are staring at a vibrant community the government chose to drown. Capelcellyn, Gwynedd. Tucked away in the breathtaking mountains of North Wales, it is roughly an hour from Bangor. On the surface, it is a magnificent, glassy reservoir surrounded by sweeping green hillsides. It feels majestic, deeply tranquil, and wildly serene. Let's break it down. Median home price is £0. Average rent? Non-existent. Your budget means absolutely nothing because the entire town is sitting under millions of gallons of water. Crime rate? Completely zero, safely guarded by water authority restrictions. But here's the kicker. This village was fully inhabited until 1965, when the UK Parliament bypassed all Welsh authorities to forcefully evict the residents just to supply water to Liverpool. Sounds like a peaceful nature reserve, right? But here's what nobody tells you. They didn't just flood houses, they flooded a heritage. While some graves were exhumed, large sections of the local cemetery were simply covered in concrete and submerged, leaving a literal underwater graveyard. As one Redditor put it, standing on the edge of the reservoir when the water is low and seeing the old stone walls appear is an incredibly heavy mourning experience. So, what is the real trade-off? You get a gorgeous hiking trail, sure, but you also get the haunting ghost of a drowned culture. And let's talk about the weather for a sec. The freezing, relentless mountain rain here is brutal. On a bad day, it turns a scenic lake into a bleak, grey landscape that feels entirely depressing. Knutsford built champagne bars over its dark history, but Capelcellyn just drowned it. And if you think a village trapped at the bottom of a lake is chilling, wait until we look at the industrial town built on a hollow crust of unstable, collapsing mines. Number 9. Blaenavon, Torfaen. This is the kind of town where you can buy a house for a microscopic budget, assuming you don't mind the ground literally collapsing beneath your feet into a forgotten Victorian mine shaft. Blaenavon, Torfaen. Perched high in the rugged valleys of southeastern Wales, it is just north of Newport. On the surface, it is a proud, gritty UNESCO World Heritage Site celebrated for its monumental role in the Industrial Revolution. It feels historical, tough, and wildly industrial. Let's break it down. Median home price is a shockingly low £125,000, and average rent drops to a gentle £600 a month. Your dollar goes remarkably far here, with the cost of living sitting at 22% below the national average. Crime rate? Elevated by local socio-economic frustrations. But here's the kicker. The mountains surrounding this town are so hollowed out by coal mining that spontaneous sinkholes regularly open up on local farmland. Sounds like a budget-friendly heritage dream, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The town's tourist allure rests on a dark history of extreme child labor exploitation. The ground is a structural nightmare, riddled with hundreds of miles of unmapped, unstable shafts. As one local posted, you can hike up the beautiful green valleys here, but you always have this nagging fear that the crust could open up under you into an old Victorian coal heading. So, what is the real trade-off? You get incredibly cheap housing, sure, but you also inherit a landscape that is structurally compromised by generational greed. And let's talk about the coffee shop situation for a sec. There basically isn't one. The town is stuck in a stark time warp where finding a decent espresso is an impossible mission, leaving you dependent on greasy spoons and stale instant blends. Not gonna lie, it is pretty tragic. At least the ghost in Capel-Celyn stays safely underwater. In Blaenavine, the dark history can literally swallow your backyard. And if you think living on top of a hollowed-out subterranean honeycomb is terrifying, wait until we look at the coastal town sitting right next to a ticking naval time bomb. Number 10. Queenborough, Isle of Sheppey. This is the kind of town where you can enjoy a peaceful afternoon at the yacht harbor, totally ignoring the fact that a literal apocalypse is lurking just a mile and a half off your coastline. Queenborough, Isle of Sheppey. Sitting right in the Thames estuary in Kent, it is about an hour and a half drive from London. On the surface, it is a sleepy, maritime escape full of historic pubs, marshland views, and classic boat moorings. It feels quiet, isolated, and wildly retro. Let's break it down. Median home price is a very reasonable £240,000, and average rent is around £950 a month. Your budget goes surprisingly far for the southeast. Crime rate? Low, mostly minor coastal disturbances. But here's a kicker. You are directly downwind from the SS Richard Montgomery, a sunken World War II cargo ship packed with 1,400 tons of live explosives. Sounds like a cozy seaside retirement, right? But then, history is now magazine, podcast, blog, and books. But here's what nobody tells you. The ship's hull is actively rotting away. Experts calculate that if it triggers, it could shoot a 3,000-meter plume of water into the air, generate a massive tsunami, and literally shatter windows across the entire town. As one local posted, you just look out at the rusted mast poking out of the water every day and think, well, hope today isn't the day. So, what is the real trade-off? You get cheap coastal property, sure, but your local landmark is the world's most dangerous non-nuclear time bomb. And let's talk about the island access for a sec. There are only 2 bridges connecting Sheppey to the mainland. If that ship ever decides to go out with a bang, the immediate gridlock means your evacuation plan is basically just sitting in traffic. Blaenavine had ground collapsing under your feet, but Queenborough has a doomsday clock ticking in the water. And that wraps up our tour of the UK's hidden traps. Which of these towns would you absolutely refuse to spend a night in? Let me know in the comment below. Smash that subscribe button if you survived the countdown, and I'll see you in the next video. Number 11. Pluckley, Kent. This is the kind of village where you can buy a flawless, historic country cottage, assuming you don't mind sharing your living room with a rotating roster of 12 official ghosts. Pluckley, Kent. Nestled deep in the picture-perfect orchards of the Weald of Kent, it is just an hour's train ride outside of London. On the surface, it is an idyllic, quintessential English paradise famous for its chocolate box scenery and starring role in the darling buds of May. It feels peaceful, affluent, and wildly charming. Let's break it down. Median home price is an eye-watering £650,000, and average rent pushes past £1,700 a month. Your bank account is going to take a severe beating here, with a cost of living sitting at 32% above the national average. Crime rate? Basically zero, unless you count paranormal trespassing. But here's the kicker. This tiny hamlet was officially crowned by the Guinness World Records as the most haunted village in England. Sounds like a cozy rural dream, right? But here's what nobody tells you. Every single old house features distinctive, round-arched Durring windows originally built by a local landlord to ward off evil spirits, creating an incredibly eerie, uniform look across the town. As one local posted online, living here means accepting that a phantom horse-drawn coach might casually rattle past your car at midnight, or a weeping red lady will wander your garden looking for her lost child. So, what's the actual trade-off? You get elite, picture-perfect country status. Sure, but your neighbors are literally centuries-old specters. And let's talk about the tourist situation for a sec. Every year around Halloween, thousands of chaotic amateur ghost hunters swarm the quiet streets, blocking driveways and screaming in the local churchyard. It is an absolute nightmare for the residents. Queenborough had a doomsday clock ticking in the water, but Pluckley has an active supernatural hotspot running right through its living rooms. And that officially wraps up our countdown of the UK's hidden traps. Which of these places would you absolutely refuse to spend a night in? Let me know in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button if you survived the trip, and I'll see you in the next video. Number 12. Seascale, Cumbria. It is a kind of town where you can enjoy a breathtaking, pristine coastal sunset, while a specialized security truck casually scans the beach sand for radioactive particles. Seascale, Cumbria. Tucked away on the dramatic, wind-swept edge of the Lake District coast, it is practically neighbors with Scotland. On the surface, it is a quiet, traditional seaside village where waves lap against a vast sandy shoreline. It feels entirely peaceful, isolated, and wildly scenic. Let's break it down. Median home price sits around £190,000, which is an absolute steal for a coastal view. Average rent is a comfortable £775 a month, meaning your bank account can finally relax. Crime rate? Exceptionally low, mostly because the area is heavily patrolled by the heavily armed Civil Nuclear Constabulary. Sounds like a total beachfront paradise, right? But here's what nobody tells you. Seascale sits directly in the long shadow of Sellafield, the most complex and hazardous nuclear waste site in Western Europe. It was the epicenter of the 1957 Windscale fire, the worst nuclear accident in British history, which the government actively covered up for decades. As one Redditor put it, it's a truly gorgeous beach, but it's a bit surreal when you notice the massive nuclear cooling towers dominating the entire horizon. So, what's the actual emotional cost? You get affordable coastal living, sure, but you also inherit a psychological paradox where the entire town depends on the nuclear plant for high-paying jobs, meaning absolutely nobody talks about the underlying risks out of economic survival. And let's talk about the store selection for a sec. There basically isn't one, because everything in this town is fundamentally subservient to the massive industrial footprint of the nuclear facility. Normal commercial growth is totally dead. Good luck finding a decent high street shop or trendy spot for dinner. Hey, at least Seascale's atomic anxiety is completely invisible, looking at you, Pluckley, with your 12 screaming poltergeists. And that officially wraps up our countdown of the UK's hidden traps. Which of these 12 towns would you absolutely refuse to spend a single night in? Let me know in the comment below. Smash that subscribe button if you survived the trip, and I'll see you in the next video.